It is 9 in the morning, the third hour. There is a hill outside the city wall, low and bare, with a name that means the skull. And on that hill, 3 men are being nailed to wooden beams, while a crowd gathers to watch. You have heard this story so many times that you may have stopped hearing it at all. So slow down with me. Stand close enough to hear the hammer fall. Because the worst part of crucifixion was never the nails. A man hanging on a cross does not die from the wounds. He dies because of the way his body hangs. The weight pulls down on his chest, and slowly, hour by hour, it becomes harder and harder to breathe. To say anything at all, he has to push up on the nails through his feet, drag a breath into his lungs, and force the words out before his body sinks back down. Which means every single word costs him something. Every sentence is paid for in pain. So when a dying man on a cross chooses to speak not once, but 7 times, those words are not random. They are the most expensive sentences ever spoken. A man with almost no breath left does not waste it. He spends it on what matters most. The Gospels record 7 things Jesus said in the 6 hours between the nails and the last breath. 7 sayings. Some of them you know by heart. Some of them you have probably never thought about for more than a second. And almost no one has ever lined them up in order and asked the simple question that changes everything. What does a man spend his final words on? Here's what most people miss. The first word he says begins with the word Father. And the last word he says 6 hours later also begins with the word Father. But somewhere in the middle, between the first and the last, that word vanishes. It disappears completely, and in its place comes a scream so dark that the people standing there could not even understand it. We will get to the moment Jesus stops calling God Father, and we will get to why that silence is the most important silence in human history. But not yet, because this is not a story about a number. This is not a story about 7 verses you can frame on a wall. This is not a story about one Friday 2,000 years ago. This is a story about what a man chooses to protect when he has nothing left, and the strange, almost unbelievable pattern in who he chooses to protect first. Let's start where he started, with the people driving the nails. The first word out of his mouth is not a curse. Think about that for a second. Roman soldiers have just driven iron through his hands and feet. They are kneeling at the foot of the cross, gambling for his clothes, while he bleeds above them. And his first sentence, the very first thing he chooses to spend his breath on, is this: Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You have to understand what crucifixion was to feel how strange this is. The Roman writer Cicero once called it the most cruel and disgusting punishment there was. So shameful that Roman law forbade it from ever being used on a Roman citizen. It was a death designed not just to kill you, but to humiliate you, to strip you naked in front of your mother and let the whole city watch you suffocate. This was the death they gave him, and he looked down at the men who gave it to him, and he asked his father to let them off, not punish them, not remember what they did, forgive them. And here's a detail you might miss if you blink. While he says it, the soldiers below are dividing his garments and casting lots for his coat. 1,000 years before that morning, a song was written that said, "They part my garments among them and cast lots upon my clothing." They're acting out a prophecy at the foot of the cross, and they have no idea he was right. They did not know what they were doing. That's word 1. Mercy for his killers. Now look who he talks to next. There are 2 other men dying beside him that morning. 2 criminals, one on each side. At first, both of them mock him. But somewhere in those long hours, something shifts in one of them. He looks at the man dying next to him, and he sees something the priests and the soldiers cannot see. And he says, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." It is almost the smallest possible prayer. Remember me. That's it. A guilty man hours from death with nothing to offer and no time to fix his life asks only to be remembered. And Jesus answers him with word number 2. Truly, I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise. That word paradise is worth stopping on. In Greek, it is paradisos, and it was not originally a religious word at all. It was a Persian word that came to mean a walled royal garden, a king's private park, the kind of place only royalty was allowed to walk. So picture what just happened. A convicted criminal hanging on a cross asks a dying man to remember him someday, and the dying man answers like a king handing out the keys to his own garden. Not someday, not if you earn it. Today, you, with me. The church later gave that thief a name. Tradition calls him Dismas. We don't know if that's his real name, but we know this. The first person Jesus promised to bring into his kingdom was not a priest, not a disciple, not a good man. It was a criminal who asked at the last possible second. That's who the door opened for first. That's word two. A pardon from a throne that looked like an execution. And now, look who he sees next. Standing near the cross, close enough to hear every breath, is his mother, Mary. She has been watching her son die for hours, and next to her stands one of his closest friends, the disciple the gospel simply called the one he loved, John. Imagine being Mary in that moment. 33 years earlier, when this same son was just a baby, an old man named Simeon had held him in the temple and said something terrible to her. He said, "A sword will pierce your own soul too." She had carried that sentence her whole life, probably never fully understanding it. And now, at the foot of a Roman cross, she understands it completely. The sword has arrived. And here is what her dying son does. He does not cry out for himself. He looks down at his mother and then at his friend, and he arranges her care. "Woman, behold your son." And to John, "Behold your mother." In other words, she is yours now. Take care of her. And from that hour, the gospel tells us John took Mary into his own home. He is suffocating. He has the weight of the whole world on him, which we will get to. And he stops to make sure his mom will have somewhere to live. That's word three. Provision for the woman who raised him. So stay with me, because something is taking shape here, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Three sayings. Three sentences he paid for with breath he could barely spare. And not one of them, not a single one, was about his own pain. Word one went to his enemies. Word two went to a criminal. Word three went to his mother. He is on the cross for himself, but he is not speaking for himself. Every word so far has been spent on someone else. But it gets stranger, because the moment is coming right at the middle of these 6 hours when that pattern shatters. When the sky goes black and the man who has spent every breath on other people finally cries out about his own. And what he says will be the loudest, darkest, most disputed sentence in the entire Bible. We'll get there. But first, I want to ask you something. If you're still here, you already feel it. 3 words spoken, and not one of them for himself. Forgiveness for his killers. Paradise for a criminal. A home for his mother. If this is the kind of thing you want more of the Bible slowed down until you can actually hear it, then take 1 second and subscribe. That's all it takes to keep these coming. And while you're here, I want you thinking about a question, because I'm going to ask you for a real answer at the end. Of these 7 last words, which one is going to hit you the hardest? Hold that thought. Keep it in the back of your mind as we go, because we're about to leave the words spoken to other people behind. The next thing he says is not spoken to a thief or a mother or a friend. It is screamed at the sky. It is noon now, the 6th hour. And then something happens that no one expected. The sun goes out. Not a cloud, not a storm. The Gospels say darkness came over the whole land from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, in the middle of the day, the light fails. For 3 hours, the world goes dark, while the man on the middle cross goes silent. And then, out of that darkness, comes the cry. Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. He does not say it in the polished language of the temple. He says it in Aramaic, the language he learned as a child, the language you cry out in when you are past the point of choosing your words. And the people standing there cannot even understand it. Some of them think he is calling for the prophet Elijah. They mishear a dying man's deepest agony and turn it into a rumor. But the words mean this: my God, why have you forsaken me? Now stop, because here is the silence I told you we would come back to. Go back to the first word he spoke this morning. Father, forgive them. Father. That was the word. The intimate word, the word of a son who has never once doubted he is loved. He has called God Father his entire life. He called him Father in the garden the night before. He will call him Father again before the end, but not here. Here in the darkest hour, the word Father is gone. He does not say, Father, why have you forsaken me? He says, my God, my God. The closeness is gone, and in its place is a distance so vast that the only word for it is forsaken. This is the moment. This is the most important silence in human history, the silence where the Son stops calling God Father. And the question is not whether it happened. The question is why. Here's the part nobody tells you. That sentence was not new. Those words, my God, why have you forsaken me, are the first line of a song. A song written by King David almost 1,000 years before that morning. It's called the 22nd Psalm. And if you read it, the hair on your arms will stand up, because that ancient song describes a death no one in David's time had ever seen. It talks about hands and feet being pierced. It talks about bones out of joint and a tongue stuck to the roof of a dry mouth. It even says, they part my garments among them and cast lots upon my clothing, the exact thing the soldiers were doing at his feet that very morning. 1,000 years early, someone wrote down this death. And now, the dying man is singing it from the cross. So why did he start there? Why quote a song about abandonment? Some believe that in that hour something happened we will never fully understand. That the weight of all of it, every wrong thing ever done by every person who would ever live, came down on him. And for the first time in all of eternity, the Son felt the absence of his Father. That the darkness over the land was a picture of the darkness he was carrying, that he was forsaken so that you never would be. I'm not going to pretend I can explain it all to you. No one can. But I can tell you this. He went into the dark on purpose, and he went in with a song on his lips, and then, after the darkness comes the smallest word of the whole day. He says, I thirst. After everything, after the nails, after the mockery, after the 3 hours of darkness and the cry of abandonment, after carrying what no human being has ever carried, the next thing out of his mouth is the most ordinary human need there is. I'm thirsty. There's a reason that one wrecks people. Because up to now, everything has been enormous, cosmic, beyond us. And then, for 1 second, he is just a man on a hot afternoon with a dry throat asking for something to drink. You felt a fraction of that on the worst day of summer. The infinite, and then a sip of water. They lift a sponge soaked in cheap sour wine to his lips, and even this was written in the old songs in the 69th Psalm. For my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. He took the wine, and he had 2 words left. Word 6 is 1 word. In English, we need 3 to say it. It is finished. But in the language he spoke it was a single word. Tetelestai. And if you only learn 1 word of Greek in your whole life, let it be this one. Because almost everyone hears it is finished and thinks it means I'm finished. Done. Over. The last gasp of a man who has nothing left. A defeat. It means the opposite. Tetelestai was an ordinary word in the ancient world, and people used it in ordinary places. A servant would come back from running an errand and report to his master with this word. It meant, the task is complete. I did everything you sent me to do. An artist would step back from a finished painting and say it. And most striking of all, when a debt was paid off, when the very last coin was handed over, the moneylender would take the bill, and across the front of it, he would write this one word: Tetelestai, paid in full. Nothing more is owed. The account is closed forever. So hear it again, now the way he meant it. He is not saying, I am finished. He is saying the bill is paid. The debt is cleared. The task my Father sent me to do, every last part of it is done. This was not a surrender. This was not a collapse. This was not the last word of a victim. This was a man crossing a finish line he had been running toward his entire life and announcing with the breath he had left that he made it. Stay with me here because I want you to feel the full weight of this. And to feel it, I need to take you out of the ancient world for just a moment into something you already know. Most of us, if we live long enough, will sit in a room while someone we love takes their last breath. Maybe you already have. And if you have, you know, there is a thing that happens with last words. People don't waste them. A dying mother doesn't talk about herself. She tells her children she loves them. She asks about the grandkids. She makes sure someone will look after her husband. With her last strength, she reaches for the people she's leaving behind. The order of a person's last words tells you exactly what they spent their life protecting. Now go back and look at the order of his. He started with forgiveness for the people killing him. He moved to a promise for a dying criminal. He stopped to give his mother a home. He went down into the dark so that no one else would have to go down there alone. He admitted his own thirst. And then, only then, at the very end, he announced that the work was done, paid in full. That is the order of a man who spent every ounce of his last strength on everyone but himself, right up until the final breath when he turned at last back to his Father. Because there was one word left. His last words are these: Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And there it is. The word comes back: Father. For 3 hours of darkness, that word was gone, replaced by a scream: my God, my God. But now, at the very end, the distance closes. The son finds his way back to the only name he ever really wanted to say. He started the morning with Father, and he ends it with Father. The dark in the middle was real, but it did not get the last word. And listen to what he does with that word: into your hands I commit my spirit. The Greek for commit is paratithemi, and it means to place something precious into the care of someone you trust completely. You use it when you hand your most valuable possession to a friend for safekeeping. But here's the part that should undo you. That sentence was not original to him either. It comes from the 31st Psalm. And in his day, it was something else entirely. It was a bedtime prayer. It was the prayer Jewish mothers taught their little children to say before they fell asleep at night. Into your hands, I commit my spirit. Close your eyes. You're safe. Father's got you. So this is how the Son of God chose to die. Not screaming, not clinging. He died the way a child falls asleep in a father's arms, whispering the prayer he'd known since he was small. And then he was gone. Watch what happens next, because it's the first crack of light. There was a Roman centurion standing guard the officer in charge of the execution. A professional, a man who had watched dozens of people die on crosses and felt nothing. He had heard all 7 of these words. And when he saw how this man died, the gospel says he spoke up and he said, truly, this man was the Son of God. Think about who that is. Not a disciple, not a priest, a pagan soldier whose job was to kill him. The first human being to look at the cross and believe was the man holding the spear. That's who the door opened for, just like the thief. That's who it's always been for. And none of this is only a story Christians tell each other. About 80 years later, a Roman historian named Tacitus, no friend of Christianity, wrote it down as plain fact that Christus was executed under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. The Roman Empire kept the receipt. It happened. So let me give you 3 things to carry out of here. First, count them again. 7 sayings, 6 hours, 1 dying man. and 6 of those 7 were spent on somebody other than himself. His killers, a criminal, his mother, the world in the dark. The only word that was about his own body was 2 syllables long, a thirst. That is not how dying men behave. That is how love behaves when it runs out of everything except the will to give. Second, that word from the cross, Tetelestai, paid in full, was not stamped on his account. It was stamped on yours. Whatever you are carrying, whatever debt you think you'll be paying off your whole life, the bill was already taken down off the nail and marked across the front paid. You don't have to finish what was already finished. And third, this is the one I want you to take to bed tonight. He started with Father, and he ended with Father. But in between, he went into a darkness so total that the only thing he could say was, "Why have you forsaken me?" He screamed that question into the silence so that you would never have to scream it alone. Whatever dark you're sitting in right now, he has already been there first. And he came out the other side, still able to say, "Father." So now I want to hear from you. Of all 7 of these last words, which one hit you the hardest? The forgiveness, the promise to the thief, the cry in the dark, the bill marked, paid, tell me below. I read them. 6 hours, 7 sentences. One man with barely enough breath to speak who spent almost all of it on everyone but himself and saved his very last breath to go home. He started by saying, "Father," and no matter how dark the middle got, that is also how he finished.